Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. The Italian Grand Prix is this weekend and Mercedes have confirmed Lewis Hamilton will take his 4th power unit of the season and therefore take a grid penalty at the Monza Grand Prix. But he will be joined by apparently 6 other drivers that are also taking penalties. Definitely creates an interesting prospect with many drivers looking to plough their way through the field. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. Plenty to discuss today. First of all, just to say real quick on the Hamilton side, of course, lots of talk right now about the driver lineup for next year, not with Mercedes, but for other teams. Daniel Riccardo, well, there was some rumours that Riccardo was going to be like a reserve driver for Mercedes. That might still be true, but then the implication was, okay, are Mercedes lining up Riccardo to replace Hamilton if Hamilton retires? But as he actually said in the kind of press conference today, I don't plan on stopping anytime soon. Sorry, Daniel. So like, yeah, Hamilton definitely indicating his intention to continue for at least a few more years until, you know, maybe he gets to 40 or something like that. The other part of this, of course, is we don't know where Riccardo is going to go, if anywhere, and seemingly the story about Colton Herta has kind of slowed down a bit. The theory was Gasly to Alpine, Colton Herta to the Alpha Tauri seat, because none of the juniors have really impressed Red Bull that much, and therefore seemingly they want Colton Herta, but it seems to be going relatively slow in terms of whether they can get in the super license. The amount of points he has isn't quite there, but if they were to discount the ovals from the IndyCar series, then he would have enough points, so I still think there will be a way around it for Red Bull to make this happen, but until Herta is confirmed to be able to go to AlphaTauri, Gasly is not going to be released, so no further news really on that front for now. But Alpine are definitely not resting on their laurels of getting Gasly. They are apparently considering 14 drivers for next year's car alongside Ocon, of course, so yes, definitely a messy situation. And Alpine, of course, have been in some aspects the engineer of their own demise with the whole Alonso Piastri drama, but yeah, you would imagine this will get resolved at least in the coming weeks. And that's also a talking point about Felipe Drugovich. Of course, it looks like he's going to be the champion for Formula 2 this season, or maybe he already locked it up, I'm not exactly sure, even though he has been in Formula 2 for, I think this is maybe his 3rd year in that series. But yeah, Brazil is a key market for Renault apparently, and therefore they are now considering maybe Drugovich as an option as a Brazilian driver. So definitely want to keep your eyes on, because Mick Schumacher is far from guaranteed to be in that seat for next season. Let's dive then into what's exactly happening with some of these rear wings, and well, what this could mean for this weekend, because Monza traditionally should be on paper an easy circuit to pass, long straight, all this type of stuff, but because at the temple of speed, no downforce on these rear wings, DRS is not particularly powerful. And I mean, look at this rear wing here from Aston Martin. I haven't really seen anything like this before. It barely even looks like a wing, to be honest. It's as flat and as a low profile as they could possibly muster, and other teams are generally going down a similar route. We can see here some of the rear wings, for example the Mercedes, like very low profile. This kind of leading edge of it is actually slightly larger than maybe for some other teams, but still a relatively low downforce rear wing as much as is possible really, and you can see that with the other cars as well. Now we shall see what happens this weekend, because we saw in Spa DRS trains definitely did come into effect to some degree, especially of course the Williams train behind Alex Albon. That car was very fast in a straight line around Spa, and you would imagine they might be able to, well, summon something similar here, especially because Lando Norris said that, yeah, because his rear wing at Spa was a lower downforce model, you gain less from the DRS, right? When the DRS is open, it opens this flap up, but if that flap is smaller and not an absolute barn door, then you gain less from the DRS. So that's a key factor this weekend in why it actually can be pretty hard to overtake around Monza, especially when DRS trains start forming, as I'm sure they will this weekend. Now Hamilton, of course, is going to try and win, like, but it's going to be rather challenging here, and I think Mercedes know that this probably, even though we saw yesterday that they're more confident here than they were for Spa, let's say, they're still, you know, I don't imagine he really thinks this weekend is the one where Hamilton's going to get us. When he says that the kind of record of winning a race in every season has zero importance to him, but I'm sure it's on his mind somewhere at the very least. Toto Wolff has said, yes, they're fully committed to winning a race this season. I'll do a video tomorrow morning for you guys when I kind of talk about the fact that Ferrari are already seemingly putting their eggs in the basket of next season. Mercedes are still committed to doing what they can do with upgrades and the like to get at least one race victory for the team this year, but it's probably not going to be Monza. It doesn't seem to suit their car particularly well, and especially because Hamilton is not going to be starting from his qualifying position. Instead, he will start from the back, and even if he was starting from his qualifying position, how good would it really be? The straight line speed deficit they have has obviously not helped Mercedes so far this season, and while there's many factors that might have caused that in qualifying around Monza, it's obviously not ideal if your car's slow in a straight line. The Red Bulls should be pretty dominant. The Ferrari, we believe they're turning up their engine mode as well because they have the most powerful engines, and that should of course help them as well theoretically, and Mercedes are in a bit of a tricky spot. Now, it's not just Hamilton, though, that's taken a penalty. We saw this, of course, back in Spa, where if it was only Verstappen that took a penalty, he would have started P20. He'd have still won anyway, but like he ended up starting P14 because many other drivers were taking penalties that weekend. Similar thing here in Monza, right? It makes sense. You don't want to take a penalty at Zandvoort, of course, given the fact that it's harder to overtake. Monza should be easier theoretically, although, yeah, as I've said, there can be other reasons why Monza is actually trickier than you might well imagine. But Schumacher is going to take a new gearbox. That's going to mean a penalty for him, but it doesn't necessarily mean a back of the grid penalty. So that's the thing. Even if Schumacher was to qualify 20th and have a new gearbox, that's not a back of the grid penalty. Therefore, he would still start in front of Hamilton wherever Hamilton was having to qualify. That's what we saw last time out in Spa. Now, Bottas, I mean, honestly, the Ferrari engines, man, they've got to get it together because Bottas, of course, had the DNF at Zandvoort. It caused all the chaos at the end of the race with the late safety car. But another power unit failure for Alfa Romeo. That means he'll have to take another engine grid penalty. Now, he's already taken one, but it depends what parts they take, whether it's going to be a back of the grid penalty or just like a 10.15 place penalty or whatever. But yeah, Hamilton will also be taking one. These rumours were emerging this morning that he would take his first extra power unit elements, and if you're going to take some, you might as well take plenty so that you can get through from now to the end of the season. It has been stated, though, that engine, so effectively the issue was back in Spa, of course, when he had the collision with Alonso on the first lap. This hard impact of 40 whatever G's they said it was definitely had some impact on the engine. They didn't want to use it for Zandvoort, right, just in case it was damaged, with the intention they could potentially mend it and therefore bring it back into the pool come Monza, right? Now, turns out the engine either can't be adequately repaired or it's just not quite able to be fixed as of yet. They believe they might still be able to fix it, but they're not confident enough that they can use this engine going forwards, and therefore, because it's somewhat damaged, even if it can be fixed, they just thought, look, we'll just take another power unit anyway, and Monza probably is one of the better places to do it, all things considered. And actually, confirmation shortly afterwards from Mercedes that Lewis Hamilton indeed will take an entirely new power unit this weekend. That's his 4th of the season, therefore he's going to get a grid penalty. Now, Mercedes, of course, unfortunate for Hamilton in a way because their car so far this season has been incredibly reliable. They look like they were going to be able to make it to the end of the year on 3 power units, but it will just be the 4th until the end of the year. But it should be an upgraded power unit on what he had in Zandvoort, for example, with more juice in the tank. So I guess it makes sense for Monza to deploy it. But other cars are also going to do a similar thing. We've heard the talk for the last couple of weeks really that Sainz and Perez, they will also need to take penalties. We saw Leclerc and Verstappen take theirs at Spa. They decided, Ferrari and Red Bull respectively, to keep Sainz and Perez up front and then, let those drivers come from the back of the grid. This time in Monza, it's probably going to be a different story. As I say, you don't want to take a grid penalty in Zandvoort if you can help it at all. Therefore, Monza is the way to go. So Perez and Sainz, we believe, will also be taking their, additional power units this weekend. That could mean either a grid penalty at the back of the grid or slightly further forward than that. But whatever the situation, we believe that maybe Albon as well might take an engine penalty. That's pretty tough, it must be said, for Williams, because you'd have thought that Williams, Albon, he could have had a good result here, right? Qualifies relatively well. Some, penalties for the guys behind him. Get the DRS train involved. It feels like it's probably not the best time for Williams to do this, but in fairness, maybe Nicholas Latifi can do a similar thing to what Albon might be able to do, right? And, create a massive DRS train and pick up a point on the Sunday. But yeah, Perez, Sainz, even Alonso apparently could be going to the back of the grid as well. Even further names thrown in. Even Bottas, of course, we saw. Schumacher, Magnussen, and Tsunoda is going to have to take a 10-place penalty because of his 5th reprimands for driving around Zandvoort with his seatbelt slightly undone. So there's loads of drivers that are going to be near the back here. And what that does mean, though, is going into qualifying, there is still a lot to be playing for, right? Because you want to qualify as well as you can. Yes, Hamilton will have a back of the grid penalty more than likely, but he will be back there with some other guys. And therefore, depending on exactly the nature of the penalties, if it's only a 10 place for some guys in the back of the grid for Hamilton, because he takes up so many new engine parts that they just add them up to 60 place penalty or something, and they're okay, just start from the back of the grid. But those are still determined by where you qualify, right? So there's still some incentive here for Perez and Sainz and Hamilton to go out in qualifying and try and out-qualify each other. And if they can achieve that, then they start further up the grid, because it can be far from easy to overtake around here. Perez probably doesn't mind too much because he's got the Red Bull straight line speed. But, we saw what happened last time Hamilton started from far back on the grid, let's say in Imola, when he was stuck behind Gasly the entire race with nothing he could do. So, of course, that was frustrating for Hamilton. He's going to hope that it's not a similar story around here at the other Italian race. The car is certainly still now better than it was before, but, look, of course, this is pretty big for not only Hamilton's year in terms of points compared to Russell, but also Mercedes in the constructors, right? Okay, Russell might start near the front, as will Leclerc, but like if Hamilton and Russell want to overhaul the Ferraris in the constructors championship, it's a pretty big weekend for Hamilton. So if he was to start 20th, that wouldn't be very good. But of course, if there's other drivers with penalties and again end up starting something like 15th, then, you know, the race is still on to a certain extent, and the race is certainly on for Perez and Sainz, because if Sainz is going to start from the back, we believe he's also going to take an entirely new power unit with a new ERS system with more power effectively, so, you know, he could be in for a good run as well. And while the track, of course, has a lot of straight lines, it can still be difficult to overtake, especially due to these DRS trains. I believe there has actually been a small change to the DRS zones this year, not in terms of when the activation points are, but mainly in terms of where the detection zone is. So apparently this detection zone 2 is now moved from before the parabolica to just after the parabolica, which probably doesn't change that much, but it is at least somewhat impactful. So yes, DRS still down the main straight here, as you might well expect. The rest of the track looks like this, but yeah, can be DRS train haven if things go the right way. So let's say the Williams is just rapid in a straight line again, or the Alpine is rapid in a straight line. It might be a real challenge for, you know, Sainz and Hamilton to make overtakes. I feel like Perez shouldn't have too many issues, but it also means that for the guys up front, Verstappen and Leclerc, if they don't have to take any penalties, as it doesn't seem like they will, then, you know, they're in prime position, and Verstappen especially to walk away with his first podium and certainly first race victory at Monza could be on the cards this weekend. So interesting for Hamilton. Of course, he's got to take another one, but of course, yes, the engine should be more powerful theoretically than previous iterations that he's had, for example, at Zandvoort. And once again, it creates an exciting storyline for this weekend, not only in qualifying, but also most certainly in the race on Sunday. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.